If you guys could go on mute, please. I'll turn the floor over to Alain to talk to us about the Kingdom Youth Rapier Marshal position and duties.
All right. Hi, I'm Alain of Ansiora, and I've been the Kingdom Youth Rapier Marshal for a year and a half. Almost, I'm at the end of my turn, a year and 3/4. So I've been at it for a while, and a lot of people wonder what the KYRM does, and if you did, this is the class for you. What does the Kingdom Youth Rapier Marshal do? Well, it's a multifaceted position and you focus on a lot of things. So I'm gonna just cover some of the things that the KYRM does and is responsible for. So it's a Kingdom Youth Rapier Marshal. So with Marshal in the name, then you know that safety is one of the biggest concerns. Safety is the big one. Is safety on the field and off the field. As the KYRM, you have to be cognizant of how kids fight, whether or not they're being safe on the field. But you also have to look out for kids as well, off the field or with other folks that aren't their parents. Ansiora has a two deep policy where you have two people that aren't related looking over someone who is a child that's in the youth program. And that is for the safety of everyone involved, because we don't really want any incidents to occur with the children. So we also, as the KYRM, I also look for the best interest of the youth fighters that we have. So not only do we do the regular martial stuff and we make sure that multiple people are involved in looking after the kids, but recently Ansiora had, maybe 6 months now, has had this reopening plan to allow for practices to resume in the kingdom. But one of the things that I stressed was that it's really hard to keep children socially distant from each other. And regardless of whether or not they wear masks at practice, it's really hard to keep the younger kids away from each other because they, you can't control the kids that way. At events, they like to congregate with each other and do things together and play with each other. And at practice, it is the same way. And so until the numbers get drastically better, kids aren't allowed to have practice in Ansiora at this time. So the first point is safety. The next thing that the KYRM focuses on is being the coach, teacher for these kids. Children require more encouragement than an adult fighter. You don't have to tell someone that you fight all the time. An adult fighter, you don't have to tell them good job or well done or compliment them in excess. But for children, they get discouraged very easily. There have been, and the nature of Rapier in itself is very competitive. And that's something that you have to balance. With kids, you want to have a balance of fun and you want to have a balance of competition. And a lot of times we kind of lean one way or the other, and it's not as good of a balance as it should be. So for one instance, there was this one tournament that I was at, and so one of the fighters did not take losing very well. And that was really difficult for them, and they would break down in tears because they lost, and it didn't really matter what you said. It was a very difficult situation, and it got to the point that other youth fighters would be reluctant to kill, to throw a killing shot or to win the fight because of that reaction. Those are the type of situations that you have to suss out because that most of the time gets escalated to you to solve. And then you have to find a way to empathize with the child and to find a way that would encourage them to continue fighting or to be less competitive. And that's difficult. You have to use a lot of empathy. You have to use a bunch of different approaches because not every child is the same. So you kind of have to get to know all the youth fighters that are fighting in your kingdom. And it makes it a lot easier to interact with them. So there was this other instance where another youth fighter was having a rough time at it and didn't really want to participate in the practice. But I talked to them and I kind of, I just listened to them is essentially what it is. You don't know personally what's wrong with, or why the child or the youth fighter doesn't want to fight or practice or whatever, unless you talk to them. And so I was talking with this one youth fighter, and I found out that she was having a bad time. And so she had a lot of pressure on her to do well, or she has a lot of pressure. And so I tried to do something that was fun. And I made the practice a little bit more fun to take the pressure off of them so that they didn't feel like they weren't, I was trying to take away some of the competitiveness. And some of the other things that you look for is what a youth fighter looks for whenever they progress. Whenever they are younger, they look for fun and camaraderie. If they stick with the program, then they are looking, a lot of them are looking to be competitive and to prepare for the adult fighting. And so if you let someone stagnate too long and they don't progress as a fighter, then they get discouraged. Ultimately, what you want to do, the ultimate goal of youth fighting is to have a program that would take youth fighters and translate them to young adult fighters and to have them continue on in the SCA. That's ultimately what it is. And it's really difficult to do if you don't understand the motivations of those that you are in charge of, I guess. There are a lot of issues that come up whenever you have two younger fighters fighting. If you tell two adults to be honorable and to call their shots and stuff, that is, that mostly works out pretty well. But with extremely young fighters or really competitive fighters, they don't do that as much. So in the Marshal for adult fighting, you want to, let the combatants figure it out themselves. But with youth fighters, you want to make sure that you step in. You have to be empathetic. You want to resolve the issue, but you have to be gentle and firm at the same time. Because you don't want to knock the young fighter off this path in Rapier, because you want to build a passion in them for what we do, and you can't do that if you make them feel bad about it. So there's a lot of balance in that. You also have to be, as a coach and a teacher, you have to be objective as well. A lot of marshals and, I got involved because my daughter does Rapier. She does youth Rapier. And it's difficult to be objective, but you have to. So if she is in a fight then I don't marshal for my daughter. And I treat both parties the same, because ultimately the wins in youth rapier don't matter. It's how well they like what they do and building the relationships with the other youth fighters that matters. The winning doesn't matter. It's having them love the SAA as much as we all do, essentially is what it is. Kids are a little bit fickle, so they get discouraged. So they need a little boost to help with that. The other thing is that you deal a lot with the parents. Parents are they they have a bias, inherent bias with their children. So you have to find a way to communicate with them in a way that it's not off-putting to them, so that they will continue to listen to you. But you want to reinforce your point. So if there's an issue with, say, blow calling or something, you don't want to go out there and say, hey, you need to tell your kid to take these shots. You kind of want to work through it with the kids, and you kind of want to let the parent gently know that this is an issue. And sometimes the issue could be the equipment and the armor, and it might not be the child at all. You want to get to the root cause of the issues that you have, and you want to involve the parents. The parents should always be involved in the youth in youth rapier. And because you don't want to just, it's not a babysitting service where you're just trying to give an activity for these young adults to do. You want the parents to be involved as well. Because if the parents are involved and the child really likes it and the parents aren't pushing too hard, then you could build something from all of that. Another part of what the KYRM does is be an advocate. You're an advocate for the program, and you are an advocate for the young fighters as well. We have the Queen's Hope, which is the I guess the premier tournament for youth fighters in Onsiora. And the Queen always determines the format, and she determines how her tournament is fought. But theoretically, as the KYM, you have a lot more experience with the different things that queens have tried with the Queen's Hope tournament. And so then you advocate for the children, and you advise the crown or the queen on the tournament. So the Queen's Hope, there's been several different ways that tournament has been run, but generally the KYRM tries to make it so that the youth fighters are a focus. There have been times, and it's debatable of the best way to accomplish that. The Queen's Hope, there have been times where the Queen's Hope has been fought before the main Queen's Champion tournament, and a lot of times the adult fighters don't pay attention to that as much, because the tournament's early and they're preparing for their own fights, and so they don't give a lot of views to the youth fighters. More recently, what has been happening is that the youth rounds, the rounds for the Queen's Hope tournament, have been embedded within the main tournament itself. And so the rounds are fought at the same time as everyone else. And so that gives them a little bit more it lifts them up a little bit more, so that they're a little bit more visible to everyone, because you're sitting there and you're watching fight, and then you're watching these other youth fighters fight as well. One of the other formats is that you would have the youth fight in between the rounds of the main tournament of Queens. Queens is usually a double elim or a Swiss 5, and you would put the youth fighters in between that. And that is another way to try to get more visibility, because essentially that's what you want with youth rapier. You want them to be more visible. So it's a difficult thing to plan for, because you usually don't know how many youth fighters you will have at an event. You could have one, you could have 10, you can have 5. So it's you have to be really flexible whenever you organize one of these events or one of these tournaments. There have been times because there's also 3 divisions as well, and they are by there are 3 divisions by age, and it's really difficult to have a match against someone who's 13 and one that is 7. I mean, you pretty much know who's going to win that. And so you try to make things, and it goes back to making things fun and exciting for the youth fighters. So you have these, the older youth fighters want more of a challenge. So if you either try to get them to fight amongst themselves, or you try to bring in people to fight with them from the adult field. And the youth fighters generally really like fighting against the adult fighters because it makes them feel like adults. Um, there was this one time there was this event, and I noticed all these youth fighters congregating, and I guess there was some kind of miscommunication at the event, and they thought that there was a youth tournament or something happening. But they were waiting there for a while, and I wanted to make sure that they were okay as part of my duties because they're youth fighters. And so I went and I got someone to run a small tournament for them where they fought against each other. And then while that tournament was going on, I went and I got a bunch of adult fighters to come and fight with the kids. And the kids really like fighting against people who are better skill, who are more experienced. They can do things, and it's very important that you convey to any adult fighters that fight against youth fighters that they make it seem closer than it is, because if you go in as an adult and you just knock some kid out, then that's not fun for anyone involved. The whole thing is to make the experience better for youth fighters so that they continue on. The youth have this, they have a lot of things going on. I remember back in my days at school, like in middle school and high school, there's a lot of different things that I would be doing. I'd spend time with my friends. I have extracurricular activities. There's sports or band or whatever. There's a lot of different draws with youth fighters. And so you have to make sure that Rapier is one of those appealing activities so that they continue on with that. Because if you don't, then they will drop it and they will move on to something else. So yeah, a lot of the position itself is to find different ways to improve and retain youth fighters is what it comes down to. It's a fluid demographic, and so it changes a lot. And if they get up to the point where they turn into an adult fighter, you only have them for so long in case if they go off to college or something. So you don't really know what will happen at the end of someone's time in the program. The best you can do is instill a love for Rapier and for fighting so that they stick with it no matter where they go. And if they return back to your kingdom or whatever, then you gain someone new. So one of the things that you look at is how the system is working as a KYRM. You have a lot of authority to make things work. And one of the things that I worked on this last year or so, a couple years, is to change the rules a little bit. Part of the role of the KYRM is to look at what works and what doesn't. For a long time, youth rapier allowed plastic rapier to be one of the things that you had in tournaments. But that presented a lot of problems. You could whip the other, the children, the youth fighters could whip each other, and that would hurt a little bit. But with the armor requirements, they also couldn't feel any of the hits as well, and so they would blow it off. You would think that it's just children being children, but that's not the case. The system itself made it really difficult for them to be honorable because they legitimately could not feel the shots that were being thrown at them. And so a change was implemented with that. So I changed it so that you would end up with epee being fought in the lower two divisions, and then you would have heavy rapier in the older divisions, the people who are preparing to be adult fighters. And so we tested that out once, I think, at a tournament. And I noticed that my daughter complained a lot about the epee being too heavy. And prior to that, I've done a lot of research on rapier, and one of the things that was brought up was one of the concerns brought up about moving to metal weapons only was that it would be very difficult for the kids or for the really young fighters to fight that way because it's too heavy for them. And we definitely don't want to do anything that would injure our youth fighters. And so we took another look at it, and my suggestion and what ended up being the final iteration of the rules is that we would have foil be the starting off point, and we would have epee be Division 2, and then we would have heavy weapons be Division 3. And foils are a lot, they are definitely a lot lighter than epees. And practice foils are actually pretty secure, I guess. Whenever you have really young fighters fight amongst themselves, they are probably not going to put out enough force to break a practice rapier whenever they fight against themselves. But it is still solid enough where they could feel the hits that are thrown at them. And so that is what we end up moving to. And the middle division stuck with epee. And one of the other things we did was we looked at the rules with Shiv youth, and we looked at our rules. And there was a difference in the age divisions. And so we shifted the ages to be a little bit more in line with each other, so that people can do both sides, and there wouldn't be any conflict or confusion in the rules. So, and the other concern that we had with the rules with moving to all metal was that if you had an older youth fighter who wanted to fight against a younger fighter, what would you do in that instance? And so we made sure that everyone, if you were fighting against a youth fighter, or in the first division, you would fight them with foil. And if you were fighting someone if you were fighting, you would always fight down to the lowest weapon, is essentially what it ended up being. You trust the adults to be proficient in any of the weapon styles, and as you progress up the ladder in youth fighting, then you are already proficient in the weapon you were previously using, and so that was the safest way we found to do that. Generally, you don't have to have a youth in the program to be involved in being the KYRM. And you don't necessarily have to be a white scarf or a mod or any of those positions. There are a lot of regionals, marshals who in youth for youth fighting that aren't actually rapier fighters. They are just kind of there to support their child. So it's very good that that happens, and you definitely want people. You definitely want the parents involved in what happens with the youth. Uh, the struggle comes with trying to find a way to keep the youth engaged. It's a lot better if you have a lot of experience with fighting, with rapier fighting, because then you can kind of show them the path and you can give them means to progress. And as someone that's experienced in rapier fighting, you kind of know, you should know different ways of teaching people. Not everyone learns the same way, and not every youth fighter is motivated or learns the same way. And so as a teacher, you want to teach to the individual youth. And so that becomes a challenge if you don't have any previous experience with rapier and you just want to get involved. But part of the KYRM is trying to teach the parents a little bit about rapier, and you give them things to work on. I know at the steps practice, there's been a few times where I've showed our Marshal a few things that they could work on with the youth fighters to help them progress a little bit more. You know, there are some drills that you can do with footwork, and there's ways to make that fun. And there are certain drills that you can do, and the other part of that is also making that fun. And then you let them spar and you have fun, and you're not really critical about what they do because they're still youth fighters, but you're trying to plant a few seeds here and there so that eventually at some point some of that grows. And I know that in a lot of places, not everyone has an experienced teacher that could show, you know, that know a lot about rapier. But that's part of what this office is for. Part of my job is to either find someone who's nearby that could possibly do it, or I mean, now with COVID and everything, there's definitely like Zoom meetings or ways that you could teach someone the concepts and philosophies of rapiers so that they can make it digestible for the youth fighters. There's the role of KYRM is to help the youth fighters by helping people teach better, teach the youth better, and to teach the youth themselves. And that is a big chunk of the duties for being KYRM. You have an eye out for the youth, you advocate for them, you make them visible, you get people excited about them, and you find different ways to make them feel like they are a part of the SCA. One of the things that happens at Warlord recently is that we would have the Roses of Onsiora come, and they would support a member of the youth rapier community, and they would come over and they would cheer for them and they would sit and watch them. Just having someone of that, I don't know, someone that high up take a vested interest in you as a youth fighter, it really makes a difference, because they get excited if a former queen was, you know, made them a favor or was there cheering for them and stuff like that. That enthusiasm is what you're trying to capture as KYRM, and you're trying to find different ways to go about it. There's too many times where youth rapier is kind of like, oh, we have to have youth rapier, and it's kind of a side event. And and your role is to try to make it a part of things, and to have the youth feel like they're involved and they're not like some afterthought or something. And that is the main thrust of being KYRM. So I've talked a lot. I was wondering if anyone had any questions about the duties that I didn't cover.
Here's one question, because I've been youth heavy marshal for Meridia's as Kingdom Rapier Marshal, or Kingdom Youth Marshal, and now Kingdom Rapier Marshal. How do you reach out to individuals to assist and participate with the program, whether it be, sparring partners, warranted marshals, how do you develop that with them?
So as a Don, it is really easy because you just find some cadets and they can't really tell you no. It's like, do you, usually I find a bunch of cadets that do it. And that's the easy way to do it. But this is one of the things that being a mod or a white scarf helps with. You have a little bit more weight in asking people to do things. And plus, if you're involved heavily in the community, you already know the folks that you will definitely say yes. There's a handful of folks that I know I can rely on. Don Orlando is really good with the youth, and he will never say no to me. About the youth. He will say no to a bunch of other things, but he won't say no to that. And Etienne is really involved. So you find the folks who have either been in this role before, or someone who's been a regional marshal before, and you go to them, or you find a cadet who's still young and enthusiastic and wants to help out, and you get them to do it. That's generally been my approach, and I've never had a lack of people who wanted to fight. There's definitely some people who will absolutely refuse to fight the youth fighters for one reason or another, whether it's due to their mundane role or something like that, something that prohibits them from fighting against youth fighters. And then I keep track of those folks so that I don't ask them, because there's no point going to that well. And so eventually you develop a list of folks that would be good for the youth fighters. So you develop that list, and then who you can go to at events. And the other thing to keep track of is how enthusiastic are the youth fighters about fighting whoever it is. Do they talk about it a lot? You ask them about how their fight goes. Are they excited about fighting that person? And the person and the people that garner the most enthusiasm that is on your list or on my list, those are the folks that I send to do this type of stuff.
Yeah, the concern that we have is that we're basically rebuilding the program from the ground up, especially with COVID. And like with Anciora, with being so spread out, the best way to put it is that we have to basically start from square one with the program. And I myself am only a lowly cadet. I'm not even a mob or white scarf here. So I kind of don't have the pull that you do either.
So you make your Don feel bad, and then you make him do it.
Yeah.
That is one way. As a Don, they want to support you as a cadet, right?
Yep.
And so they should be able to pull the strings for you.
And then you also have to develop your own and start reaching out, and especially now, because what I'm considering on doing is that, since I'm also a youth heavy marshal and a youth rapier marshal, is basically in the new year taking a three-pronged approach to it. One, of getting a post out there to the parents and the youth saying, we're revamping the program. We're going to relaunch it as soon as we can. What can we do for you to support the parents and youth to get interest and to develop the program? And then I'm also going to have another post towards both the heavy and rapier fighters of like, you know, we need help, you know, with the size of the kingdom. Would you be willing to volunteer? You know, go right down. We need warranted marshals to be able to run the practices. We need, you know, sparring people, and try to get a general interest out through Facebook to get everybody interested and basically get the assistance by asking for help.
Yeah. Starting with the parents is a good approach to that. Parents with children that are of the age where they would participate in these programs. It's a little bit easier to get those folks involved because they have a vested interest in how well their child does. So that would be my starting point for that. In terms of marshals, that's kind of what I look at. If someone has a youth fighter in the program and they're going to be there for a while, then you know that they're going to have to be involved anyways. So it's a little bit easier to ask them to do things like that.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you will find someone enthusiastic about, teaching the youth or teaching. I know whenever I was making my way up as a cadet, I focused a little bit on the youth fighters because I noticed that there was a need for them to be taught. You have to find people who are more like that, who are willing to teach. A lot of folks are they want to improve themselves and they want to work on their game. And those people, it's kind of hard to get them to come out and do something like that. You have to just talk around and talk to a bunch of different people to see what their motivation in this society is. And for those that want to be teachers, that want to make things better or want to help, those are the folks that you focus on because they're more prone to helping you. And if it's an issue of them not knowing enough about it, or if it's an issue of them not being experienced in Rapier, then that is something that you could help with to help them prepare for the role. A lot of the times it's really difficult for someone, we have a lot of newcomers that show up and they want to help. They want to do things to be more involved. We get that question a lot. How can I be more involved? Well, you could train some people up to be involved. You can take that enthusiasm and get it focused on youth fighting. You can pick those folks up who have enthusiasm to help out the game, and you can guide them to becoming a good youth marshal or to get them involved that way. But those are things that you could possibly do.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions? Well, I was going to ask you a question then, if no one else has any. So tell me, what is your favorite part of being the Kingdom Youth Rapier Marshal?
So my favorite part is the joy the youth have. There was this one fighter who I was helping train, and I told them that every single time they landed a rapier shot on this knight that was doing rapier, that I would give them a cookie. And so their intensity went up by a lot. And so they tried really, really hard. And then I told them that for every shot that they landed on someone's foot at any tournament, I would give them a cookie for. And so they would tell me about it every single time they did it. And so at one tournament, I finally went and I bought one of those, big American cookies that are huge. And I just gave it to them. I was like, here you go. Good job. But they were really excited about it. That enthusiasm is something that I enjoy about the process. I like people being excited about Rapier. I want this system, like as a person that does Rapier, I want to see my community grow. And I want it to get bigger. And a large part of that is having youth fighters retain their enthusiasm for fighting, so that they get better, and then I get older, and so eventually they beat me, and I like the challenge. But seeing the kids progress is another thing that I like. You can definitely tell a difference between someone who just I don't know. For youth fighters, I always see a lot of potential. I'm like, you can change this, you can change this. If I teach them this, they will get better. And then throughout the years, you see them get better. And that's also good to watch. I mean, part of it is seeing the enjoyment that they have, and part of it is seeing them progress from young fighters who can barely hold a sword into someone who's extremely deadly and I don't really want to lose against, because that would be really embarrassing to me. But just the youth in general is what I like about the role. You get a more hands-on approach. You're a little bit more involved in how they do, and you're invested in them to do.
Yeah. No, that's great. So what then on the flip side would you say is the most difficult part of the job?
So as much as I like the youth, you also have to deal with the youth. And the youth fighters, let's see, there's different challenges. When you're talking to an adult, you have some baseline understanding of how things work. When you're talking with a youth and they are not being reasonable, you have to find a nice way of conveying what you want in a nice way without being mean about it.
Right.
It's kind of a difficult juggling act, because then you also have to talk with the parents about it. That is the most difficult part about it. Dealing with issues and figuring out ways to resolve them in a manner where everyone walks away happy. You have to work a lot at it.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. And I've seen some of it with Orlando, but yeah, it's definitely a balancing act. So I guess my last question then is, what would you tell someone who's interested in applying for the position?
Absolutely. You should definitely apply to the position. Uh, it's a very fulfilling position, because you have a hand in shaping um, the youth fighters as the Kingdom Youth Rapier Marshal, and you kind of have the ability to change things, to make things better. If you are invested in Rapier, you have a passion for it, I highly recommend it.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Did anybody else have any questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Lots of great information, and I'm sure everyone else enjoyed it as well. And I hope everybody has a good rest of their evening.
All right. Well, thank
We'll
everyone for coming.
Yep. See you guys later.